Hello, my name is Philip Telfer. We're glad to be here. And I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion on how we choose films and why. We're going to introduce ourselves. I'm one of the founders and I'm the director of the Christian Worldview Film Festival. We began in 2014, and so this is our 12th year. And that means we have had 12 years of judging films, which cumulatively probably exceed about 1,500 submitted films over those 12 years, which I've seen nearly every one of them. And so I look forward to talking about this process.
My name is Caleb Knott. I am an audio director at Oak Hills Church in San Antonio, Texas. Actually landed in San Antonio because of this film festival. I'd heard rumors of a Christian Worldview Film Festival. And so that's one of the reasons we landed in San Antonio. I've been involved for, I guess several years. Been a judge for maybe 9 years, working behind the scenes, making this festival happen.
My name is David Cook. I've had the privilege of judging films for quite a few years as well. I work full-time making movies, and it's exciting to see new films and people that are submitting films. And it's a lot of hours of watching stuff, guys. A lot of hours.
Hello, my name is Rhett Simpkins. I'm a co-founder of the Film Fest, so I've been a judge for all 12 years. And I'm also a pastor and a father of 4 children, so that also plays into how I look at the films.
Okay, so how do we judge films? Each of us are going to share a little bit about how and why we judge films. I'm going to give just some of the basics, and some of that has changed over the years. From the very first year, though, we had multiple judges. In fact, the first year we've had 5 judges that watched all the films that were submitted, which were a little over 100 films. We had to do that in our first year in about 17 days. And this was a very daunting task to find people willing to do that and give up a good portion of their life to do that. And they did it passionately. We, from the very beginning, always had some sort of judging form that our judges would follow along. In the early days, it was very simple. And it had just a handful of questions, scale of 1 to 10. And in fact, in what I've learned from other film festivals, that's how most of them are done. Just a handful of questions, scale from 1 to 10, and then you make a score. Over the years, we have expanded that into questions for our judges, which have 3 categories, which is worldview, storytelling, and then the production values. In each of those categories, there are a handful of questions that have a point value of 0 to at most 3 or 4 points per question, and there's multiple questions, and they're very specific questions that are designed to be as equitable as possible across the judges. And then, so every judge will watch the film, fill out that score sheet, and at the end, their scores independently go into a spreadsheet, and then all of those scores are added up, and it's nice. Excel does a great job sorting numbers, and we see which films really rise to the top. As we're going to talk about some of those specifics, we're going to take your questions. But one of the things that has changed is because the number of films that we get submitted now continues to increase, and the number of films that we are able to play at the film festival has decreased, and so it's getting much more competitive. Right now we do a 2-tier judging system. Rhett and I are 2 of the members on a first tier, and what we're doing is we're watching every film the first 15 minutes. So if it's a film under 15 minutes long, we watch the whole thing. If it's a film over 15 minutes, we only watch 15 minutes of it. And what we're doing is every film that we're watching in the first round we start out with it at a passing level. So you're passing to begin. The question is are there things in your film that will mean it doesn't pass? And that's not on us, that's on the filmmaker. We have rules that we publish, and filmmakers should read those rules ahead of time. So, for example, if you have profanity in your film, now it's possible it could come up after 15 minutes, but it never ceases to amaze me how many put that in the first 15 minutes. It helps us be alert, like, well, they didn't read the directions, they didn't read our guidelines for submitting to a film. So that would be one of those things. Profanity is one of those things where at that point, if we see profanity in a film in the first 15 minutes, we just put an X and we move on. And we're not gonna pass that film on to the next level of judges. There's no reason. It broke one of the submission guidelines. So we're looking for things like that. But I'm gonna give everybody an opportunity to just kind of share a little bit about their experience with judging, and maybe some tips along the way too for how your film can stand out at CWVFF.
Being an audio person, I'm really paying attention to how does your film sound? Your on-set, your location sound, your sound effects, your music. It all is very important. And unfortunately, I also understand that a lot of times on an independent film, you're out of money by the time you get to post. So one of the things I would really encourage people to do is to save or to budget properly, keep finances on hand to really hire someone who knows what they're doing on the audio side, to hire a composer who can really mix down the music well. Because if you can't listen to a story, if you can't understand what's being said, your story's not going to have an impact. So really pay attention to that audio piece.
And Caleb, on that, wouldn't you say that as far as budget, that's probably, well, maybe this is a question for David too, because you work with budgets, but wouldn't audio be probably something more easily budgeted to make sure you get right?
Yeah, I would think it'd be easier, especially on a smaller film. It's not a lot of people. You're not having to hire a very big crew, but you're also the better skilled people are probably going to charge you more. So a lot of times you will kind of get what you pay for when you're hiring an audio.
Yeah, and one thing, I love audio as well, and just maybe listening to it in different environments can help you catch some things. But one of the things that I love about the judging process, we don't have to have everyone in the judging process be a skilled filmmaker, because the way the judging is set up, we're able to expand that audience to a lot of other people when we're looking for judges. And what I'm getting at with that, some of the types of things we'll ask are like audience questions. Like, if this particular audience was watching this film, would you recommend it to this audience, or how would they feel? Those kind of thought processes. And without going into too much detail, it's something that's important to think about when we're making a film. Who's the audience? Because if you're the audience, or you're making something that you like because you think it's good, then you're spending a lot of effort just to watch it over and over yourself. So if you start thinking about who's going to be watching the film, and you start putting pieces in that might disqualify it, you're actually just losing audience. So as much as some people will have strong opinions about leaving something in or not, we just in general, through the judging process, think it's better to try to reach your audience by avoiding certain things and also including certain things. So think about, what if children are watching this, or what if my pastor would watch this, or those type of thought processes eliminate a lot of what's the technical position on this or that? It's like, well, do I want to show this to Jesus? That's not one of the questions, by the way. But just, right? It's like, what would Jesus see? So just thinking about those things can help inform so much from writing all the way through the process, thinking, who's the audience? Would this be offensive to the audience or not? I was working on a movie where we had this game that was being played by two of the characters. It's like, well, what game do we pick? And there was one game choice. It's like, well, that could be a turnoff for some of the audience. Versus we had another game option that wasn't. It's like, well, we don't need to argue about whether one game is better than the other, or whether somebody should be offended about it. It's like, if I can have more people listen to the story and hear the message of what I'm wanting to share, why not go with that option?
Yeah, I think one of the things to note about the judging process is just the hours and hours and hours. You're watching feature films that are an hour and a half, sometimes pushing 2 hours, and you have lots of them to watch through. And we have teams of judges that are doing different film categories, and each category has at least 5 judges that are watching these films. And after doing this for several years, we realized what kind of a burden that is on a person to watch that much in a short period of time. Now, our first year, as Philip mentioned, we had to watch all of these films. I think it was like 53 hours of film in 17 days. That does something to you. Now, that should tell us something about the potential for media to bring us down or to actually bring us up. And realizing what that does to a group of people who are really prayerfully approaching this with a desire that there's good material out there, and how that has the tendency to bring us to a place where we don't want to be, just by the nature of becoming jaded or seeing things repeated over and over, repeated mistakes. That's where we came up with this 2-tier system, where now we're looking at the first 15 minutes of the film. And after many years of doing this, about 9 or 10 years, well, about 9, the last 3 years we've done this, we realized that there's so much of the film that you can tell in the first 15 minutes. When you're setting up your story, we can tell whether you've thought about who is your protagonist and what is their goal. If you haven't done that, it doesn't matter whether you've submitted to a film fest or if you've put it, on a screen for your friends or put it on YouTube. The audience is going to check out if they're not invested in the story. So storytelling is a really, really important part of what we look at. And like David was saying, that is something that even just film consumers are going to be judging, no matter where your film is slated to screen, whether it's online, in a theater, or any other venue. The consumer is your audience, and whoever you're targeting it, they're going to check out unless you've grabbed their attention. So story's really huge. Another thing that we're really keen on at the Christian Worldview Film Festival is that we're really looking at whether or not this aligns with a biblical worldview. So films may be very, very well done technically. They may even surprise us with how well the storytelling is. But if there are things in that first 15 minutes that make us as pastors and as Christian men and women who are judging this, if it makes us uncomfortable with where this story might be going, then that's something that can have it score a little lower as well. Now, if it passes that first 15 minutes, it does go on, and the entire thing is watched by our panel of judges. But there are some simple things that we have noted early on that we can say, like Philip mentioned, profanity. That's something where it's like, I don't think we can trust where this is going if they're already violating the basic things in our guidelines.
And on the subject of profanity, you can argue. There's some people who want to argue the point about why profanity should be allowed. I remember we had when we were in Nashville, we had Bill Reeves come and speak from a distribution side of things, and he said the same thing. He says, "Look, you don't want profanity in your film because you are going to limit. If you want your film to have a broader reach, you're going to limit the reach of your film." So it's not just like, oh, we're, Pollyannas and we haven't, believe me, before I was saved, I had a pretty foul mouth. And after I came to Christ, the Lord, by his grace, helped me to clean up my language. And so I don't use profanity, but I've heard a lot of it. And so it's not so much like, ooh, I've never heard profanity before. It's the fact that you want your film to have the broadest reach, and you need the church, and you need pastors, and you need the Christian community to be able to get behind your film. And why put something in there that's going to limit your audience? You can get the point across without the profanity. Now, another thing about the judging process is with CWVFF is every year I know that we have people who have submitted projects. More than 50% of the projects, now it's probably climbing to more like 60 to 70% of the projects that are submitted are not selected. We don't want you to be discouraged by that. We actually do want you to be encouraged that, first of all, your film might not have been selected just because it's a very competitive category. Take, for instance, documentary, which I'm a personal fan of. I love documentaries. It's my favorite category. It is more affordable to produce a documentary, and if you don't know it, Christians do a great job producing documentaries. And you can do it for a lower budget, and they're very interesting and compelling, so that's why I love that. But so if you're entering a documentary, you have to know that's a highly competitive, and it's also what we realize for any documentary filmmakers out there, so okay, we got a few. So I'm a documentary filmmaker, and yet it's sad to say that when we have a film festival, it's the least watched category. Like, people want to watch the narratives. And so if you go into a screening room for the documentaries, there's a handful of people. And so that also affects how many documentaries we're going to play. We want to play the best. So your documentary might be fantastic. It just, there were a few others that really rose, like they say, the cream rises to the top. And so that doesn't mean it's a bad film. That doesn't mean it doesn't have purpose or usefulness or will find an audience out there. It just, we are not able to show everything. And we are making steps, especially this year. If you've been a part of this event for many years, you'll notice something in our program book this year. We have a lot less films than we have had in previous years. And this is all based on feedback, and as we're learning, I've got a big heart, and so I've probably been the biggest perpetrator of allowing more films in out of just a desire to give a platform to up-and-coming artists. But when it's all said and done, we are trying to limit the amount of films. We've got all of our screenings down to 2 screens. This is going to be a better viewer experience for those attending the festival. You can see more. So that's just a reality. If your film doesn't make it in, it doesn't mean it was a bad film. It doesn't mean that we thought it was a bad film. It just may not have been the best film in its category to make it into the festival.
Yeah, an unfortunate piece of judging is there's kind of the 3 categories. There's that first category, it's kind of the easy chopping block of they didn't follow the rules, the production value was way too low, et cetera, that gets cut off. Most of the films fall into this middle zone of pretty good, not really great. For those that land at the top, a lot of times, unfortunately, we're looking for reasons to either say this film is better than that one, or that film maybe didn't do so well in this area. And sometimes it comes down to, like, if you have a tie, you're breaking a tie by 1 or 2 points. That being said, like, unfortunately for myself, sometimes I'm looking for a reason to dock somebody points. Look at the whole picture, and don't give the judges a reason to say, oh, well, you included this or you didn't include that, or you try to push a boundary of storytelling. It's like, well, that didn't quite work. Don't give us reasons to give you negative points.
Yeah, I've got another thing just on timing. So when I was studying for ministry, they had this thing that they said about when you were sharing a message or teaching, and they said if you keep it short, that's best, because if you're not very good, people will be more forgiving, and if you are good, you leave them wanting more. And I think that applies very well to film. Try to keep it concise. Don't let it run too long. That's a common mistake that we'll see. People would do better to trim their story. Look for anywhere that you can cut, you typically want to cut. And that's something that pretty much applies across the board, but it also makes it easier for your film to get in, because if you've got a specific amount of time and you've got 3 minutes of time left in a block, and you've got a 3-minute and a 12-minute, guess who might get in? The 3-minute, because there's not time for the 12. Don't make your film just to get it into the festival, okay? Hopefully there's something more that you're making your film for, but just think about it from the perspective of time being valuable for every viewer, and think, okay, is there a way that I can trim this? Is there anything that just doesn't need to be there? get feedback from other people, have people watch your film. If it feels long, it is too long. If it feels long, it doesn't matter whether your story needs it or not. If it feels long, it is too long. You have to figure out a way to rework the story to make it shorter. So that's just a consideration.
One of the judging hacks over the years, and these guys might be able to relate to that, is one of the things I do on my judging sheets is I just start watching the film. I'm hopefully enjoying it, but at the moment that I want to check where the timeline is, because you can't do that in a theater, but when you're sitting in front of your big computer screen, when you want to start looking like how much is left of this film, I actually note that. I note that time because what that's telling me is I'm losing interest. I'm really bored right now. I kind of want to know when this is going to wrap up. And it's very frightening when you look at that timeline and you're like, oh my goodness, we got a lot. It's like, this feels very long. And so timing is important, even for the film festival, for example, on the feature length, whether it's a documentary or a feature length narrative film. When we get submissions, that's why we do limit submissions to 2 hours maximum, but that's not ideal, and I'll tell you why. If you're submitting a film that's over 90 minutes, guess what? We only have so many blocks during a couple days that are actually 2 hours long, and they're not over 2 hours. So if it's a film that's close to 2 hours, it's going to also minimize its potential, but that's also the case for theaters. So in theaters, if your film is so long, it's going to have less times it will show in the theater and it'll have less reach. So it's not just the film festival like, oh, why don't you make a 2.5 hour time block? And it's not reasonable. So that's one thing that we actually get every year, someone submitting a film. If it's 2 hours, it probably needs more work in the editing room.
Yeah, that's right, because not everybody's Peter Jackson. We can't make all these films 3 hours long. But another thing we're considering when we're watching these films is we do have 3 different categories that we're judging. We're looking at the worldview, we're looking at story, we're looking at technical abilities, and all of those things have different questions that we're answering about whether or not the film meets this kind of criteria. And like Philip said, you're kind of at a 0. This is where everybody's tracking unless you don't do it well, and then you drop down, or if you do it exceptionally well, you go up. But if there was, of those 3 different categories we're looking at, if there was one that we lean in on, it's the worldview category. And so there are a lot of films that may score lower technically or lower as far as storytelling, although those are important as well. But we do favor the worldview. And one of the reasons for that is because we believe that this is an avenue not just for storytelling, not just for technical ability, but that with those things, we have an obligation to the kingdom of God to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ and to disciple his children. And so we take that really seriously, and we do lean that direction. And so there may be some films that, we've had some people ask us, well, how come this one got in and my film didn't? Well, because they did really well with the heart behind it and with the direction it was going. And so we note that, and we score that higher.
And that being said, ideally, the top films that are going to be awarded and screened at this festival are going to score above average in all 3 categories. Because when I'm judging, it's hard to just, so basically in my mind, especially after 12 years and 1,500 films, I have like a baseline of what your average submission is going to look like. And so I just start at that basic level. And then when I watch a film, it's either going to rise above that or it's going to be below that, below average. But the films that really stand out are the ones that actually get all 3 of those working together. That's the goal. And so you can have good worldview packaged really poorly, and it actually reflects poorly on the worldview, in my opinion. If you have good worldview, but you've not taken the time to even do the basics. Sound is one of them because there's no excuse not to get good sound. But it's interesting that when you're watching a film, as soon as you hear bad sound and noise, it now skews your perspective, and that would be for any viewer. Our first year, and this was already mentioned, that many of our judges are not filmmakers, and that's very important. They're just consumers. They're people who they're advocates for Christian film. They love Christian film. Our first year, we had a team, a husband and wife. The reason I asked them to be judges is because I didn't know anybody like them who had, at the time of the world of DVDs, when there were still DVDs and we weren't digging them up out of limestone, but they had the biggest collection of Christian films of anybody I ever knew. They were advocates for Christian film. They loved Christian film. So I'm like, what great judges, because they love it. So it's interesting. And so when they were judges that first year, over 100 films, I think it was 107 films, 17 days. One of them, his name is Jim. He told me, he says, Philip, I love Christian films, and I know that their quality is not like Hollywood. He says, I used to think that one of the biggest problems in Christian films was bad acting. He says that in my perception, it was bad acting. That's the worst thing in Christian films. They just don't have good acting. He says, but now that I've been forced to watch all these films in a short amount of time, he says, I've changed my perspective. He said, the biggest problem is the lack of good storytelling. They don't know how to tell their story well. And that was coming from someone who was an advocate for Christian films, a big Christian film fan, someone who loved it and yet could recognize the storytelling, even if you had Christian worldview in it, if you're not telling that story well, it then minimizes the reach of the good worldview that you have. All right, any other thoughts before we go to questions, if we have any questions? Do you have questions? Anybody submit a question for us through poll everywhere? Okay, we're waiting to see it here in the monitor. So our tech team, if we can get it in this monitor, because my eyesight is not that good. Okay, there we go. All right, so the first question is here, have you ever recommended a film to someone personally that didn't make it into the official selections for the event? I will start, and the answer is yes, I have. There are some films I truly resonate with that don't make it into because it's not up to me. It's not up to one person what films make it in. That's why we have a staff of judges and people that are volunteers, and their scores are going in there. So there have been films that have not made it in that I really loved and I would recommend. There have also been some films that have made it into our festival that I wouldn't recommend. But on the flip side, some other judges really liked it and I didn't really care for it. But once again, that's why we have multiple judges. It's not up to one person. But how about you, Caleb?
Yes, I have recommended films. Again, there's lots of factors that go in. One of the big factors is who's submitting in a given year. Not every filmmaker can submit every year. So some years we get, like you said, lots of documentaries, lots of music videos, lots, of really good submissions in one year, and another year maybe there's not so many good submissions. And so yeah, it happens to where you're like, hey, I know of this because someone submitted it to the film festival, but hey, let's go find it on YouTube, and I really want to show someone else's work.
I mean, the same, yeah. There's definitely been a few. One of the items that will happen sometimes is there may be content that's not ideal when we look at the audience that we're going to have at the festival. It doesn't mean it's not relevant, but maybe dealing with more serious subject matter or showing things that we're not comfortable showing everyone. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a place, but it doesn't have a place for young eyes, or it doesn't have a place for this audience. So that's something we've had to deal with sometimes. And it's tough because we want films to be made about tough issues, but it's a very difficult thing to walk the line sometimes between what you show visually or don't show visually when you're trying to make your case. And I think that's probably something we run into most years judging. People tackle difficult subject matter. And because they'll have difficulty navigating some of that, it's not something we can show. That said, for the right audience, it's still relevant. Or it might be something we say, hey, you would benefit from seeing this, but not everyone would. So we have to make that distinction.
How about you, Rhett?
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree. There have been several films that I've passed on to friends that I knew were interested in one subject or another. But like we've said before, it really comes down to how that shakes out in the spreadsheet and what we're able to show at the festival. So a lot of films that don't make it are great films that I would pass on.
Yeah. In fact, this year, I won't mention names. There's a film that did not make it into our festival. I didn't believe it would make it into our festival. But there were elements of it that were very moving to me, and things that I would want to share with other people. But also, we can't do this, but if I could have given some consultation to the filmmakers, I could have sat down if they were open to that and say, you know what, if you're willing to listen to some editing advice, I could share with you how this film could have been possibly an award-winning film at our festival. But because the bulk of the film had some very problematic elements that weren't mindful of certain things, that film, I knew I passed it along because it moved me. I think we passed it along to the next round, but I'm like, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to get past the second round of judges. It'll be interesting, and it did not, and I didn't expect it to. And yet I will probably still, if I could find it on YouTube at moments, scroll to the end of the film and have people say, I really want you to watch this part of the film. I wouldn't want them to watch the whole thing, but I felt like there were elements of it that, like, this is very powerful. And so sometimes it's just a matter of getting that feedback. One of the greatest moments in one of our core values is embrace critique. And I'll share this with you because I was at a screening of one of the Kendricks films. It was a pre-theatrical, and they were still editing the film. They had a group of people watch it, and they were getting feedback, and they let people really blow holes in the film. And I was kind of like shocked that they were so open to that kind of critique. And the next morning, I was having breakfast with Steven, and I told him, I said, man, I don't know how you guys do that. That was brutal. I mean, these people, you invited them, and some people were really like tearing up your work that you guys have invested in. How do you do that? And he just kind of smiled. He says, well, this is how we do it. He says, first of all, we need the critique. But he picked up a napkin from the breakfast table, and he says most filmmakers, when they're asking for critique, and he held the napkin over his heart, and he says, and representing the film, and he said, critique my film, and then when people start shooting holes in it, they take it to the heart, and they're just bleeding out all over, This is the way we do it. And he held his napkin out to the side. He says, critique my film. We don't hold it over our hearts because this film is not us. And we have good intentions. We hope it to do well. We need the critique. We actually need them to blow the holes in it. But we can't take it to heart. And so we need to hold that with an open hand. And I just thought, wow, I wish every filmmaker would receive that kind of critique. You do have to get your film critiqued by someone other than your family or your friends. You need to find some way and so a film festival is one way you can have that critiqued. Now this year we're doing something new for the festival. Every year people ask, I wished I could get feedback. The first few years we tried to do that. It's too overwhelming to provide beneficial feedback for filmmakers. Even if you were paying for it, we just don't have the bandwidth as volunteers. So this year, a suggestion came our way. We thought it was a good suggestion. So you'll look in your programs, and there's a QR code for every film playing this week. And this allows the audience, and it's a short little form. And this is very common in pre-screens. If you've ever been invited to go observe a film before it hits theaters, they're wanting feedback. And so they'll provide a QR code or a piece of paper, and they ask you to just give us feedback on this film. So we're actually doing that this year, and filmmakers will be able to receive audience feedback on their film, which we hope will be beneficial to them. We're going to encourage all of you to be nice about it, be kind, you know. By the way, I'll just throw this in here. I learned an acronym. You remember the acronym, Rhett? The Think Before You Speak? I taught this in youth group. Rhett used to be part of my youth group when I was a youth pastor years ago. And it was called Think Before You Speak. It came from Pastor Alan Redpath. And it's THINK, stands for T, is it true? So it needs to be something that's true. Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So any kind of feedback needs to be based on that when we're communicating with people. We need to think before we speak. It needs to be true, but just because it's true doesn't mean it's helpful. Just because it's helpful doesn't mean it's inspiring. And even if it's inspiring doesn't mean it's necessary. But it always should be with kindness. And that's what we hope to do is we're trying to be as kind as possible, but we also do need to use discernment. That's a judging process. All right, so next question. Do you judge the young filmmakers category differently?
No, and yes.
Good answer.
When I'm judging a film, and I don't know if I can speak for the other filmmakers, but I don't even look at what the way we structure it is whatever's submitted. If it's a short film made by a young filmmaker, it gets judged with the short films. If it's a music video made by a young filmmaker, it gets judged with the music videos and so on. So I don't even look at whether it was a young filmmaker, because you'd be surprised at how well they do sometimes. And so we don't look at that necessarily. But there have been times where we're like, okay, this may not have made the cut, but it's a young filmmaker, and wow, what an effort. So we do take that into consideration. We have included young filmmaker films on that basis, but when we first start out, no.
Yeah, I would agree. It's both. Because they compete within their category, but we do give out a Young Filmmakers Award, so we do identify all the young filmmakers, and we do want to, and not all young filmmakers who submit. Just because you're a young filmmaker does not mean your film is going to get into our festival. Quite a few young filmmakers' films do not get into our festival. And there's no reason they shouldn't, because over 12 years, we have had some impressive films from young filmmakers. In fact, I'll just tell you a story. We had one from a family out in Oregon, and some young filmmakers made an animated film.
The Hills.
Yeah, so The Hills is a 3D animated film. It was for our Fatherhood Commission contest. It was called Father-Daughter Dance. You can find it on YouTube. And it's beautifully done. It was made by someone under the age of 18. They put a lot of heart into that effort. And the shocking thing was because it was 3D animation, when they went to go render it, they had to take it to a render farm. It was going to cost this kid $20,000 to render it at a render farm. And it's like, well, we can't do that. So they had to shop around, and they found a render farm that was willing, because he was a student, willing to do it at the cost of the power for that. So you're just getting charged for the power needed to render that film, and that still cost him around $2,500 just to make that film. So that's some devotion dedicated. And over the years, we've had some. I remember I was just speaking about this today. We received a submission from a young filmmaker a few years ago her name is Lauren Havel. She submitted in the feature film category, not something we recommend, by the way. And in fact, I recommend that if you're a young filmmaker, you keep your films as short as possible. And kind of going back to what you said, some wisdom there, some sage wisdom about keeping things short, and people will be more forgiving. And so when I saw even just the list, oh my goodness, and it wasn't a long feature film, it was like 40 minutes. So it came into the feature film. It's over 30 minutes. So at 40 minutes or 45 minutes, it's now considered a feature film. And I just groaned, honestly, when I saw that as a judge. What is a young filmmaker doing submitting a 40-minute film? Until I watched it. And it was great. And it actually hung with the big dogs in the feature film category. It didn't win feature film category. It won Best Young Filmmaker. And so that's an exception to the rule. but generally we would prefer them to be shorter if you're a young filmmaker. Okay, another question. Does the score given film submissions during the selection process also determine who wins the CW VFF Awards? All right, anybody want to take this on?
Yes.
And no.
And no. Yeah, so everything goes into that list. The lower ones that don't even screen, they're not included as official selections. And then of the official selections, we do have several processes that we use, but generally it's just where they score. But we also recognize that judges score on their own score scale, on where their personal gauge is. And so we have other ways of sorting the scores and finding winners.
Yeah. Well, there are two different types of awards that we give out, and one are within the category. And within the category, it's for the most part based on what comes up in that spreadsheet, which is really nice. You're taking all the judges' scores, and it's going to come to the top. Once in a while, there are ties, and we have to determine how we break that tie. We have methods of doing that. It's rare that that happens, but it does. On occasions, we have not been able to break the tie, and we've awarded more than one film for the award. That's also very, very rare. But the other thing is we also do give out some awards that are based on things like sanctity of life. There's not a sanctity of life category. We've had sanctity of life. It could be a feature film, it could be a documentary, it could be a short film, a short documentary, it could be a promotional, it could be a music video. And so those are nominated awards by our judges. They know that we're giving out a certain number of extra awards, and as they're going through the judging process, we ask them to nominate films, and then we base that on the number of nominations, as well as if you have, let's say, on the sanctity of life, and you have judges from all the different categories, but they all have an opportunity within their category to nominate a film for that, then we're going to analyze that. At the end, it may be a judgment call to say, out of these films, even if they have equal number of nominations, which was the better of the film, and that could go back to the scores. But then again, once you're crossing category, it's not apples to oranges. So it does get a little tricky, but we do try to be just in as much as possible in all that we do. Those are the exception. For the most part, it's going to be just based on the scores of the films. All right. Next question. Does the score... Okay, wait. Okay, are there submissions you watched the first 15 minutes of and liked it so much that you finished it anyway? And the answer is yes, I have. And that's a great testimony to the film. When I only have to watch 15 minutes, there are some films that I will be deeply interested and I want to see it all the way through. And I will take the time to do that. That's exactly what you want in your film. That's the opposite. On the other hand, there are films where I'm committed to watch 15 minutes and I can't wait till the 15 minutes are up. I'm like got a timer going and I'm like checking it every 30 seconds, going like, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Yes, I got through it. Okay, next film, so.
And I would add to that too, there's also sometimes where you'll watch 20 or 25 minutes of it. We're committed to watching at least 15 minutes, but there are times where it's like, okay, I realize that with the length of this film and how they're structuring it, it may not be fully set up yet, and I want to see where this is going. So we might watch more of it, but there have been several times where, yeah, I want to see how this ends.
Ideally, your film, if it's a short film, it better be set up within 15 minutes.
Sure.
And but if it's a feature-length film, it needs to be set up in the first 15 minutes. That you need to get those things nailed. But there are some occasions where I have questions as a first-tier judge, where there's something like, so far I feel like this is a good film. But I think I want to watch more because I have some questions about it. This is something that we've dealt with a lot. In those first 15 minutes, you're either going to build confidence in your viewer, or you're going to bring a sense of like uncomfortable, like I hope the best, but I'm really not sure where they're going. In those cases, I will watch as much as the film as I need to watch to determine, is there anything that's going to be a gotcha in this film? And that's interesting that we've found over the years that usually there's hints of those gotcha moments at the beginning.
I'm going to branch this question into our scripts. We haven't talked about script contest yet. But on the back end, again, very similar. We have a first round process where it's the first 15 pages that we use to filter out kind of those easy out scripts. And then we have the questions that our judges have to fill in, more long form answering questions as they read through the entire script. But this has happened to me several times where, yes, I'm committed to the first 15 pages, similar experiences of like, oh, I'm only on page 4 or page 5, and I got to get through 10 more, versus I look at the corner and I'm like, oh, I'm on page 30, 40, and this like, so to me, going through that first round, like that will stick a script in my head so that when I'm looking to that second round, I'm looking forward to either finishing that, or sometimes I'll just, if I have the time, I'll sit down and I'll read it through the whole time, and then that probably means you're going to get a second read through from me if your script pulls me in that first 15 pages.
I'm glad you brought up scripts, because this is the most important thing, because a script costs you time, but paper's pretty cheap, so printing paper, but it does take time, and I believe if more filmmakers would spend more time getting their scripts reviewed and getting feedback at the script level. And after doing this contest for a few years now, reading scripts is very challenging, but when it's a well-written script, for a person who's judged both now, if the script is well-written, it's like watching a movie. And it's really exciting because you can just see it, and you just kind of get lost in the story, and you're just watching the story unfold on the screen, even though you're reading it on paper. That's a good script. A script that doesn't do that is a chore to read. It needs to do that, because the director is going to need to be able to know how to tell that story, and you should be telling that on the page first. So that's something that you can just fix and should be fixed, and go through numerous stages of getting critique and refining before you ever pick up a camera.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of that, I'll just sort of add to that concept of I'm interested in story. I find the writing process probably the most fascinating of all the disciplines that come together to make a film. And so I began reading screenplays of films that I enjoy, just to see how they were written. And when I first started doing that, I noticed, oh my goodness, I can visualize this. Now, I had seen the film already, but you begin to see that everything that was written was so carefully written and edited and rewritten and edited that is what ended up on the screen. And so now, as a judge, watching films and judging them, you begin to wonder what was written on that page. And so sometimes, like Philip was saying, the cheapest thing you can do is to get it right on paper before you film it. I'm sure David could speak to that as well as a producer, but that is so critical, and that's why story is king, and that's where we're going to be looking at that when we're judging. But it just gave a little bit more insight into how we look at films and judge them once we started doing the screenplays as well.
Okay, next question, if we have another one. Okay, why are big studio films excluded from the festival? They're not. They're just not submitted for the most part. And there's reasons why, because these films are, especially if they're going to have a theatrical release, there are a lot of precarious things. David, as a producer, could probably speak a little bit more to that. Why theatrical releases generally are not getting submitted to the festival.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just they're protecting that. They don't want it to get out ahead of time. They also just don't need it. It's a big marketing thing for an independent film, but a studio film isn't putting their focus there. One of the things, like a lot of other film festivals do exclude them. And the reason why is it's not an even playing field, and they're trying to help independent filmmakers. And so I think the reverse of that is, who does it help the most? Independent filmmakers. So that's why independent filmmakers are going that route, and the studios usually don't, just in very simplest of terms. But there are some studio-connected films that will go to very large film festivals. So it's not that it never happens, but it's all marketing for them, so usually it's just not worth the effort.
Yeah, and every year you'll notice that we will oftentimes have showcase screenings. So we have 1 or 2. This year we'll have 3 showcase screenings. Some of those are bigger productions, some of those are not. But generally, like last year, we had Unsung Hero that played here as a showcase screening. We had Jesus Revolution. We've had the Kendricks films. We had The Forge. So we will, some of those studio films, they'll want to just kind of collaborate with the film festival, but not put it into the competition. And for all of you independent filmmakers, that should give you a sigh of relief. It gives you a little more of a chance. So, all right. Next question. Do you have general Christian audience judges? If you do, how do you apply to become one? We don't have we do need judges.
Yeah,
sometimes.
so typically speaking, the way it's worked is we've approached people that we felt would make a good judge and asked if they would give of their time to do that. So that's the way it's typically been done, because we want to be very careful with who the judges are. We want to make sure that we feel like they have a good baseline, right, to be able to judge the films. And that's based off of the 3 categories that we're looking at, right, which is worldview, story, and the technical side. So you don't have to know the technical side to be able to judge the technical side. I mean, something I've told judges when they're saying, I don't think I can do it. I'm like, well, here's the thing. Whether you think it's bad directing or bad acting, or good directing or good acting, you don't have to know which one it is. If something was good and you think it was the directing, then you're going to score the directing higher. If you think it was the acting, you're going to score the acting higher. Either way, you've identified something you felt was valuable and put a score on it. Or if you didn't think it was good. And then, so in that respect, you don't have to know everything to be able to be a good judge, but we've typically reached out to those. Usually, we do come up short on the number of judges we have, and we have to ask people that don't have enough time to be judges for us. And thankfully, we've been able to always make sure we had enough judges in the different categories. I don't know the answer specifically to how to reach out if you wanted to, but we do have ways of reaching out if you want to volunteer. So I would just start there, look on our website, try to find a way to reach out and mention that you're interested in that, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Also, as we think about judging, think about some of your favorite films, and if you were to liken it to taking a trip in a jet, if you're traveling by jet and you get on the runway, do you want the plane to take 15 minutes to get off the ground, or do you want it to get off the ground as quick as possible? You see, this is the challenge, because when I remember, like when I was younger and the first time you ride in a jet, it's very, the acceleration where it puts you back in your seat and you really feel it is very exciting. Scary for some people, but it's very exciting. But it wouldn't be so exciting if you know that this plane is supposed to get off the ground and you only have so much runway, and you're going down the runway and the plane's not taking off, would you be concerned? Yeah, you would be concerned. And also, we have to think about film like that. That's why 15 minutes is very generous. 12 minutes should be the outer limits of that. The story you're telling needs to get established as soon as possible. We need to, we want to encourage you, take the story classes here. We need to know who the story's about. We need to know what it is that they want. And I can't tell you how many films, whether they're short or even long form films, I can't answer that question. When I watch the film, I actually don't know who I'm supposed to be tracking with. I don't know who I'm supposed to care for. And it's not the audience or the judge's responsibility to like your film. And that's important to know. They do not have, no judge or audience has an obligation to like what you are submitting. It's your job to make something that's likable, to make characters that are likable, to make a story that is compelling. And that's what really attracts the judges, but it will also, what attracts the judges, I believe, will also attract the audience. And it is interesting, for many years, it's been very telling. It doesn't always happen, but I would say 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, our top films have also been Audience Choice Awards, where the audiences judge, and that always feels good, because I think our judges did a great job. They're in line with even what the audience has said is their favorite film. All right, so we're almost out of time. So thank you for being here in this panel discussion, and we hope that you continue to learn while you're here, to get better at your craft, and that your projects will be good seed that gets planted in good soil, whatever that soil is, to produce good fruit for the kingdom. That's our hope, and we hope that that would be global. And so we are rooting for great projects to come out of this room. So thank you, and thank you, Caleb and David and Rhett, for being a part of this and for serving so many years as judges. It's a thankless job, and not many people actually want to do it. But give them a hand, because they've done a lot of hard work judging films.